Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Kari and today I'm doing my best books of 2018 video. There are just under 10 if I remember correctly, so I'm gonna go through my Goodreads and we're gonna go through them chronologically because one, it's easier, and two, that's just what I'm doing right now. Let's get started. The first one is The Shadow of What Was Lost by James Islington. This book is a trilogy, and this is the first one. I have the second one behind me. I did like the second one a little bit better because this first book did still feel a little bit like setup. However, it was a phenomenal first book in the trilogy. There is a wall, and there are two types of mages. One are called augurs, one are called something else. And basically, augurs are collared so that they can only do a certain amount of magic and they have to be permitted to do it, and they're trained in a very specific school. Things go a little bit awry because our main character turns out to be an augur and all sorts of hijinks. I loved this series. It is a high fantasy and I just adored being able to jump into this world and follow the high-paced, rather character-driven actually, plot as well. Next is All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. This is a historical fiction set in World War II, and it follows a young, I think, French girl and a young German boy as they traverse World War II. It was fascinating because the girl is blind, and so to see the world, so to speak, through her eyes, and then to watch a young boy who doesn't really know what's going on but is forced into German youth and all of those groups was heartbreaking. I didn't cry because I don't really cry during books. However, it was definitely emotional and will tug on your heartstrings at the very least. Next was a bit of a surprise for me, which is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. This copy I got actually over in London at Harrods because I had to buy books when I was at Harrods, why wouldn't I? And this copy is just so adorable. But it was written and published in the 1860s in French, and it's sort of one of the beginnings of science fiction. This professor and his assistant and this sailor that they meet get shipwrecked, more or less, and taken in by Captain Nemo and his crew on the Nautilus. They can't leave because once you step foot on the Nautilus, you're just not allowed to. And they go 20,000 leagues around the oceans. This was just such, one, like I said, a surprise, and two, just so phenomenally written. I loved watching the characters and the problems that they had. There were a couple times when I was actually on the edge of my seat, which is rare, I find, with some of the lengthier classics. But this one was written in such a modern way that it was easy to read, and I absolutely loved it. Next we have The Girl in the Tower by Katherine Arden, and I can't find my copy of it, but it is somewhere here, so somewhere. The Girl in the Tower is the second book in the trilogy. The third one comes out sometime early next year, which is really exciting. And it's set in medieval, Renaissance-ish Russia. It starts out in the first book in a small town with the main character, Vasya, and she has some sort of folkloric magic, the ability to see household demons. Her stepmother comes in and is a unbelievably pious Orthodox and decides that Vasya cannot have anything to do with the household demons, nor can anybody else. So that starts a whole thing, and I loved the atmosphere. Katherine Arden is amazing, amazing, amazing at writing cold Russian winters. I also really loved watching Vasya and the demons interact and watching her figure out why things were changing and how to protect these demons. Next is, surprise, surprise, Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. This, oh my goodness, we're only in March. Alright. I read this in March, basically the day it came out, and it is a Nigerian-inspired fantasy where a girl has to bring back magic to her world. The relationships in this are amazing, with the exception of the fact that everybody seems to have to be paired up, and that just drives me nuts. But, you know, I can live with that. So, amazing setting. I loved the vibrancy of it. The world is astonishing and so rich. It was hard to come out of the world and realize that our world is not that way. Also, just the cover. straight up the cover is just one of my absolute favorites. If you have not read this book, if you're at all interested in high fantasy, definitely read it. Next up is Molokai by Alan Brenner. This is a story that follows a girl in the late 1800s who is diagnosed with leprosy, and at the time all lepers are sent to Molokai, which is one of the Hawaiian islands out there. It's no longer a leper colony, but this girl is 7 at the start of the book, and you watch her grow up dealing with leprosy and life in general. It was a fascinating read and beautifully done. This one, again, didn't make me cry, but it definitely made me tear up because I just was so angry at people for what they did to her and felt for her so deeply. I don't know how else to explain it, but if you like vivid settings and amazing characters and different premises, this is definitely a phenomenal book to read. It's also fairly short, I think about 500 pages. Nope, it's less than 400 pages, so that makes it even better. But it's just, I highly, 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 highly recommend this book. Next is Nevernight, which I borrowed from my library, but I will be buying soon, by J. Kristoff. This is a trilogy, I think. The third one comes out in sometime this next year, and it follows a girl who has decided to join a bunch of assassins, which is a very respected group of assassins, in order to get vengeance on those who killed her father. Amazing. There is so much action and great relationships and smut and just everything you could ever want in a book is packed into this. These two, Nevernight and God's Grave, killed me multiple times over, and I didn't even know how to react when they ended because there's so much in them. I'm quite positive that Pierre Ford or Kaz over at Little Book Owl can explain it more articulately than me, and since Nevernight is one of Pierre Ford's absolute favorite books, beside Red Rising, go check out her channel, which I will leave linked down below, and she will tell you all about it much better than I ever could. It would not be one of my videos if an Elizabeth book did not come into it, and this was definitely one of my favorites. The Life of Elizabeth by Alison Weir. This is a nonfiction about Elizabeth I, as the title suggests. This covers her entire reign, basically from 1558 until 1603 when she dies. I learned a lot, and then was sort of reassured that my knowledge isn't just all fiction by many of the other things that were reiterated in this book. It was well written, it was engaging, and I think it did a phenomenal job of explaining both sides, or all sides, of Elizabeth. The vain, capricious person, the hard-assed ruler, all of those things that made her into one of England's greatest monarchs. We have the second in another trilogy, which is The European Travel for the Monstrous Gentlewoman by Theodora Goss. This book is sort of a science fiction about a group of women from all of our favorite classics, such as Frankenstein, Dracula, Dr. Moreau's Island, I think it's called, all of those type of things, and they bring the daughters of those men, whether biologically or metaphorically, together, and we see them deal with both life and trying to figure out why their fathers did this to them in this trilogy. The first book was really good, and it sort of brought them together literally, and then this book you see them actually go on adventures and get closer to each other. I adored watching the relationships grow in this because I think it's a little bit hard to find good female relationships, and this book does a phenomenal job. Next I have The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This should come as a surprise to nobody. There is so much hype surrounding this book. And may I say, it is well worth all of the hype. This book is about a Cuban-American actress who chooses Monique, a biracial, I think she's half black, half white, if I remember correctly. Anyway, two biracial women, one of whom is the actress Evelyn and the other one is Monique, who is interviewing her. They go through Evelyn's entire life, specifically focusing on the husbands, because that's just a really good way to organize it. And there is a massive plot twist at the end that I definitely called, but maybe that's because I've seen far too many TV shows and read far too many books and I just always go that direction. Anyway, amazing book. It deals with race and gender and sexuality and life in general. I loved this book, cannot express enough praise for it, as with most of the books on this list, because they're my best books of 2018. If you haven't read this, then you definitely should, as long as you are okay with some crudeness. There is a fair amount of swearing in this, however that doesn't bother me, so I absolutely adored it. And the last book on my list for my best books of 2018 is The Silk Roads by Peter Frankopan. I just finished this one this month actually because I was very behind and November was a bit of a thing. Check out my November wrap-up, which I will also leave linked down below. This book is another nonfiction, and it follows the Silk Roads, so kind of the Middle East, Asia, not as a whole, but like, you know, where Marco Polo traveled, more or less. It follows that area from basically 0 AD, or 0, whatever, up until when this book is published, which is 2015. It is amazing to watch the transformations and the goods and the power struggles across this area, and also to watch the power shift. For example, it went from Asia being this amazing and technologically advanced region to eventually Europe. Kind of went through the Middle East, and the Middle East was doing really well. And then we had the Crusades, and they won most of those because Europe was idiotic. Anyway, I have a whole lot of opinions, but this book is amazing, and there's a lot of personality to it. It's very well written. It is a massive book. I think it's about 600 pages. Yep, just about 600 pages. So it's not a short book by any means. However, it is so well done that if you are at all remotely interested in history, I highly recommend this because it provides a fantastic overview of this area and how it affects other areas of the world for the last 2,000 years. So those are all of my best books of 2018. I don't know how many there are, but in editing I will count and put a number up here somewhere. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, like and subscribe. Goodreads and Twitter are linked down below, along with Pierre's channel and my November wrap-up. I will see you in my next video. Bye.